Alright, so let's talk a little bit more about Karma. So we're gonna render everything in Karma. I did do a bunch of experiments with Mantra as well, but Karma is just a lot faster, but there's a couple of things that you need to sort of take into consideration when you're gonna be doing these things. So I think the easiest way to go forward is to just do this in a empty scene first, and then later we'll move back into this thing to explain how this all works. So similar to how I did it with the Pyro and the Axiom part. So this is a very quick basics. We're mostly going to be using Karma with these Karma ROPs. We're going to do a couple of things here in the actual LOP networks, but for the most part, a lot of the stuff just happens with the ROPs here. All right, so in this empty scene, let's first make make some fire. So it's a simple fireball. You know what? Let's actually just grab our old Axiom explained thing. We made a little bit of fire there. I guess we could just use that one. All right, so we got some stuff going on there. Let's just do a null here, and let's call this sim. Let's make a render node. And let's object merge our fire in there. For some reason, it's complaining again. All right, just have that cool for a couple of frames. Like you would probably cache this out normally, but we're just gonna do some basic things here. All right, no, all right, you're not. Doesn't want to. All right, let me just file cache this out real quick, so at least we can be sure that it's actually there. 35 fire. Right, can just use $hip for now. Save to disk. All right, load from disk. Let me put this in render here. All right, there we go. So a little bit of fire going on. Yeah, so let's start setting some of this stuff up for Karma. By the way, if you want to know more about just the regular rendering stuff in Karma and Solaris, because here we are mostly going to use the Karma ROP. If you want to know more about Solaris and my workflow there, you can have a look at this thing. Sassy Snacks v2 Mojito Magic, which is a course I developed in partnership with Side Effects, which is about the Vellum Fluid Solver and also rendering in Karma and compositing. It's a 21-hour course, quite extensive, and it's free. So if you want to know more about Karma, I suggest to check this out. Got a good response from it, and people seem to like it. So you can check that out as well. But for basic stuff, let's just make a grid here. Let's just actually type grid to make it a little bit bigger. All right, there we go. Move it down a little bit. All right, let's make a camera. All right, so we just got a basic thing here. Oh, got a basic thing going on here. So let's do a Karma ROP. This is quite similar to the Mantra ROP. It's of course has different render settings because Karma and Mantra are not the same, but you can see it's somewhat similar in sort of the options here. And in here you can select your objects that you want to do. You have different render options. So here you have a bunch of things you can do. So candidate objects will be only rendering if the display flag is on, similar to Mantra. Forced objects will always render, and we'll get into forced phantom and this other stuff later. And exclude objects will, for example, even if they are in candidate objects, and then include objects, it will exclude it from the candidate list. So stuff like that. Pretty straightforward. So let's do for example, let's first in our candidate object, let's put our let's call it RNDR fire, by the way, and then RNDR grid. And the reason why I'm using RNDR here is, for example, what I can say is I can type RNDR underscore star, and now it will grab all of the things that are appended with RNDR, which is just a general workflow tip that might be useful. You can open up the viewport there, look through the camera, and now if I press render, You can see it will start rendering. And so that's a thing that's in with this thing. You need to open up. It opens up a second viewport. I wish at some point they will hopefully have a render view similar like this. I would much prefer to just have it in here. You can make that work, by the way, if you go in here, go into the lob network, then just make a scene view, and then it crashes. So I'll be right back. So what you can then do is just, you can go into your Karma lob network. You can make a scene view here, viewer, scene view, camera, and now we should be able to dive out of it. And you can see now we actually do have a sort of a Karma view going on there. So we can just put this to Karma and it'll work. So like, again, I don't understand why they don't have that as an option by default, but you see now it works and we can render some stuff in there. You see, if I double click on this now, it will jump out of it, which is annoying. If you want to keep that open, you have to actually go in here and then start locking the view to 2. So then you would need to keep this open. In Karma context, another thing you could do if you want to keep it like that is you could make a new, where is it? A new network view, and you would go to out, go in here and just link this to whatever, like 9 or something. Just go out of it and link this one to 9. And just go in here, and now this will just be linked to 9, and now I can do in here whatever I want, and I can still have the Karma viewport. Again, I really hope side effects will just make something like this, because you can see it's pretty simple to just do this yourself. So you would imagine side effects could just do something like this. And now I have an actual viewport here in my interface, which I can use. And I can still navigate through my things here. So just a little quick tip, I guess. Just pin something there and then it'll work. And side effects, if you're watching this, please make something like this an option, so we can actually just have a render view similar to the Mantra render view. All right, I'll stop rambling on now. But again, like this is this working. You have different ways of rendering your scene. So default is variance, and you have path traced, and you have distributed. So variance will fire more samples where it needs. So minimum samples and maximum samples. If you crank down the maximum samples, it will do less overall samples. If you do this higher, it will do more overall samples. It will take longer. I generally just use path traced. This will just randomly fire rays. You don't really have any control, but it's generally... I found it generally faster than the other things, but I guess with distributed or with variance, if you just put this low, it's also going to be fast. I generally have it to path traced. I just use the pixel samples here and some of the other things here. So this is pixel samples is just the overall samples that you're going to fire. So if I make it higher, it's going to be longer. So if I do 24, you see it's fire a lot more samples. There's also distributed, so that's if you have, for example, if you have a scene with a lot of reflection and refraction, you might make these higher and then just the rest lower. You can have control over whatever it is that you're doing. When you dive into Solaris here, you can actually, like if you build your own network, you can actually do manual overrides on objects. We'll get into it later, or you can check out my course here, which goes into a lot of this stuff there. But you might notice here that there's not, we have this, let me make the background dark, by the way. So we have this pyro thing here, and it's, it's quite sort of dark. There's not really any bounce light. So this is a thing where, for example, if I have the render fire here, let's do a pyro bake again. Let's do pyro bake. And let's enable fire. Compute range. Right, so now we're doing the baked volume. And then there's a thing called let me, by the way, I want this to look a little bit better. Let's maybe... Let's do visible black body for now, just to prove a point. Color ramp, we're gonna mostly use the color ramp. By the way, let me also introduce maybe a light here somewhere. So we actually have, and I need to link these to first frame real quick. All right. So we have something to cast shadows there. All right. Cam 1, link it back to 9. All right, there we go. Let's increase that. Let's make it sphere. All right, beautiful. But you can see there's not really much bounce light going on. So there's multiple ways to do this in Karma. The slow way, in a more accurate way, what I mentioned before with when I came up with the cloud example, is actually, as you can see, the volume limit here. So this is how many bounces are going to be inside of a volume. Now, if you have an accurate volume, you're going to have multi-scatter. So that means that this light is going to bounce through sort of the fog. So it's going to hit the particles in the fog, and then that's going to create a nice look. But right now, you can see this resolves pretty fast. Even if I put the samples up, you can see it's relatively fast render. Now watch what happens if I increase my volume limit to, let's say, 2 bounces. Or 2 bounces. Right. As you can see, now we are getting, and by the way, let me go to render, turn off depth of field here. That's a thing where depth of field is, oh, okay, now it's disabled. The depth of field will sometimes turn on by default, which is weird. But you can see this is quite a lot slower here now. It's actually not as bad as I thought, but this is a very low resolution sim. So in this case, it's not going to be too bad. But trust me, if you have higher resolution sims, this is going to be quite slow. And you see if I put it to 4, it's going to get even slower. But now we're getting sort of this bouncing through the volume. Let's increase the smoke density, make it darker so we can get all right, 2, 1. Right, so you can see it's sort of bouncing through it a little bit, and if I turn that off, you see you don't have it. No, you do have it, but it's quite slow. And over here in this example, it's not too bad, but trust me, it's gonna get really slow, really fast. Another thing you can do is just keep this off, and the Pyrobake volume has this thing called scatter, and this will do sort of a fake scattering. And here this looks terrible, but let's turn off masking. All right. So if masking is trying to do some masking thing, but just doesn't look great. But if we just do it like this, you can see we get a result. It looks great, much faster. It's not as accurate, but it's a lot faster to render. Again, in this example with this low resolution pyro, it's not necessarily, you might not necessarily think much of it, but for my scenes, it was literally changing some frames from being like 30 seconds a frame to being a couple of minutes a frame. So there's quite a big difference. So this scatter thing is there, and it will really help out whatever it is that you're doing. We're going to get into that in the main scene in a little bit, because if you have multiple things inside of this object merge, like let's say multiple, like an extra piece of geometry coming in, then this scatter is not going to work. So there's ways to deal with that. But yeah, that's the scatter thing. And then we got nice looking scattering. Yeah, all right. Volume step rate is essentially how many slices is the volume sort of cut up into, like how many voxels is it gonna sample? So if it's set to 1, it's gonna sample every voxel. It's gonna make it a lot slower. As you can see, if it's set to 0.25, it's gonna sample 25% of the total. If you make this really low, it's gonna be fast, but it's gonna look terrible. You can see now not getting any detail, but some cases that might actually be fine. You can see we really lose the detail if we go really slow. But if we make it really high, like it's between 1 and like 0.5, you're not really 0.25. You're not really losing much. So generally 0.25 is pretty decent. So some other things. Let's say if I want to just use the fire. So let's say I want to render my fire separately, like I have in Nuke here, where I have. So I have fire, and I have light on my objects separately, which is generally what you wanna do. So you have some control and compositing. So there's multiple ways to do this. Let me just show you a couple of ways. First, let's just do our candidate objects. Let's just put a grid. And we just have the grid here. Now you might think, because in Mantra, how you would do is you would make a volume light. So how that would work is you would just make a volume light, or you would make a volume light, so a geometry light, and then select the thing and then put it in light. Well, that doesn't work for Karma. What you would do is you would just put it into Forced Phantom. So just put fire in Forced Phantom. You can see now I get just the light and not the pyro. The problem here is that let's say I want to increase the intensity of the light on the environment, but I don't want to change the material. Because now what I would need to do in order to change the intensity, I would need to change the intensity here on my fire as well. So let's say I would, this is the scatter, by the way, on the fire. So let's say I would like make this 500. So I get like brighter, or 5000, like it would get brighter. But if I now have a look at the fire as well, if I just put fire in here, let's turn it off in Forced Phantom. You can see now the look of that thing completely changed. So and with the geolight, the benefit there with Mantra was that you could control those separately. Which you cannot really do in here yet. So you could do, there's a couple of ways to deal with this. You could have a separate object and do like fire light or something, and then hide that one, and then keep like put fire in here, and then turn that down again to like, what was it, like 67 or something. Let's make it 69. It's a nicer number. And then you could do Forced Phantom. You could do the firelight, and then here you could. All right, that's actually a problem with this thing. Forced doesn't seem to work on the camera. So if I turn it on now, it's gonna work. But so you do need to turn it on. But then you can see, and I have it. It's a little bit extreme here. Let me just put it to 500. As you can see, so that would work. So then it will be brighter. So that's one way you can do it. And again, I'm not sure why not forcing it, because that's what it's supposed to be doing. Another way to do is let me just remove this, which I was doing in my project for the most part, is just open up. So enable editing of contents, go in there, go into Lob Network. And what you can do here is scene import. I'm going to import the fire. There we go. So if I now go in here, it's going to import this fire. So we just have this separate fire. So now we're actually in Lob context. Right. I'm going to add a material library. And I'll do a pyro material. I mean, let's just do XPU pyro preview. This is meant for XPU pyro, which I didn't use, and I'll get into that in a little bit. But you can just have some simple controls. So let's do something like that. Let's assign the thing, so you can see we can do the intensity in here, make it a lot brighter. And then let's do geometry settings. And then we need to, because these lob input primitives doesn't always work, because especially for volumes, because a volume is multiple primitives, and for some reason this just doesn't always work. And if you want to do it on everything, just put a star and then it'll work. Again, there's some of these weird things, but again, what you want to do is you want to go to render visibility, set or create, and want to do phantom. So similar to what you had before. And you can see now it disappears. Well, what we want to then do is treat as light source. Yes. So it's going to be treated as a light source. So it's not going to be visible, but it's going to be treated as a light source. Now let's merge it in here. Let's go all the way down. And all right, let's check this out. Let's turn off the fire there. All right, so you can see now this still works. So we loaded it in, and now we have separate controls here on the on the light. And I can just put my fire back in here. So now I have separate controls here on the light material. So I guess we could call this light material. And can just can control it sort of separately. Again, there's still, if we turn it off, there's still light here because we actually also just put rendering the regular fire. But again, if we turn that off, it would be completely disappeared. So yeah, that's what I was doing with Geolight. So some other stuff, you can also use matte objects. So let's just make just a box to demo this, I guess. Let's do a box. All right, there we go. So if you just put something, let's put it in between our fire, right? And then you can go on your Karma Lop and Forest Matte. Then you can grab your box. Again, need to go, I had to restart Houdini, so the network view with my trusty old linked to 9 thing was gone. All right, let's link it to 9. All right, there we go. Karma. All right, you see now the box is matting out the thing. If you want to do this in Solaris itself, it's also pretty straightforward. So let's turn off Force Matte. So how you do it in Solaris itself, you would do a scene import. Import my little box. Let's include invisible. Let's do another geometry settings. Settings, there we go. Assign it, and then you go again to render visibility, and then instead of doing the this one, let's do, oh yeah, we don't need that one, by the way. We just need hold out mode, set or create matte. All right, merge them. Boop. All right, and you can see there this works. Well, we do, by the way, still need this thing because we need it to be invisible to primary rays as well. So we do need whatever it is that I was doing. Alright, that's just primary rays. Which one was it again? I think, oh yeah, of course we still need to do, I always keep forgetting that. You need to put the star thing there. And then let's turn this to do nothing. All right, there we go. I always keep forgetting. It's just really annoying. But yeah, you can see now this works. And if you wanted to do some visibility, that would also work. So you set up some matte objects, because of course that's what we're going to be using for the trees. So you might ask, why didn't I use Karma XPU? Well, there's a couple of problems with it. Let me go back to my original scene. For example, matte objects don't work. Let's try this one, for example. So let's say I go to, I want to view this one. Let's just open it up as a Karma viewport instead. Let's look through things. Yeah, it's starting to get a little bit slower. All right, there we go. All right, so let's first put it to CPU, by the way. And let's press Shift 5, by the way. Then you can actually check out this render view like this. You can see this works fine. It gets matted out with the tree that's in there as well. So there's holdout geometry. Let's see what happens if I put it to XPU. So that's the with these holdouts that I had before. As you can see, holdouts don't work. So we'll just render these matte objects here that I have. It will just render them. So that's why I didn't use XPU, because I did really need these holdouts. If you can get away with not using holdouts, then you could use XPU, but there was a problem here. So there's with the XPU again. That's why. So XPU runs on GPU. By the way, there's a lot of issues still with it. Like I was trying this in my demo scene just now, and for some reason it's not even working, which is weird. I'm not sure. If I'm honest, I'm not sure why, because in my other scene it was working with XPU generally, but let's say I should boot fire 9. Oh, wait. Yeah, out. 9. All right. And it's now suddenly working. No, CPU engine. Yeah, you can see for some reason it's not doing anything. XPU. I'm not sure why, but XPU still. I don't necessarily recommend using it at this point. There's still a lot of problems with it. But that's why I didn't use it. Just the holdout weren't working. So I did experiment with it, but yeah, that was one of the important things. So there's a couple of other things that we need to discuss about just Karma and in general. But I think for the rest of the stuff, let's just do it in my actual scene, because like I've went over all of the sort of the basics. So let's I guess jump back into the actual scene, and let's start discussing how this was set up and some of the issues that I ran into in order to render this.